Hey everybody, Mr. Wallowitz here. We're going to talk a little bit about the Cuban Revolution and Fidel Castro, how Spain came to control Cuba, how the Cubans eventually got their independence from Spain, the relationship between Cuba and the United States, and Fidel Castro's relationship with the United States. Spanish colony. The Spanish established their first settlement in Cuba in 1511. Over the centuries, the island became one of the largest global producers of sugarcane. Taino resistance to conquest began shortly after Europeans' arrival. The island's indigenous and enslaved African inhabitants, as well as later multiracial separatist groups, made various attempts to reject and remove Spanish control of Cuba. Wars for Independence. In 1868 and 1879, Cubans tried unsuccessfully to gain their independence from Spain. In 1895, another attempt at independence began. In 1898, the United States joined the war on the side of the Cubans. By December of 1898, Spain gave up control of Cuba. Independence. The United States took control and ruled Cuba through a military government. By 1902, Cuba achieved independence. However, the United States was still allowed to intervene, particularly in the economic or foreign affairs. Many American companies, especially agricultural and sugar companies, wielded a large amount of control over the Cuban economy and government. Batista takes power. In 1933, Fulgencio Batista came to power in Cuba after a massive labor strike motivated by government corruption. Early in his 26-year rule, Batista implemented some progressive social and economic reforms, but later suspended these. Government corruption and brutality grew over time during his administration. The number of American companies operating in Cuba, particularly in the sugar industry, grew, and the United States supported Batista until 1958. Attack on Moncada Army Barracks. On July 26, 1953, Fidel Castro, who was educated as a lawyer and became part of a group critical of Batista, led an attack on the Moncada Army Barracks. The group became known as the 26th of July Movement. Its goals were to overthrow Batista and carry out progressive reforms in Cuba. Castro was arrested and put in jail. He was released in 1955 after public outcry and moved to Mexico to continue building support for his movement against Batista. Cuban Revolution. In 1956, Castro and other members of the 26th of July movement snuck back into Cuba and established a base in the mountains. They quietly worked to build more support among the Cuban people. Starting in August 1958, Castro's armies surrounded major cities and cut off railroad and supply lines. On December 31st, Batista fled Havana, the capital city, and Castro took power. Visiting the United States. The Eisenhower government recognized Castro as the new leader of Cuba, and in April 1959, Cuba visited the United States and met with Vice President Richard Nixon. Bay of Pigs invasion, April 17, 1961. Relations between the United States and Cuba quickly soured. The United States grew skeptical of Castro. Castro banned foreign ownership of land in Cuba. Remember that many American companies owned agricultural land there and took over privately owned business. In October 1960, a United States embargo of Cuba began. Americans were not allowed to sell anything to Cuba except food and medicine. In April of 1961, the CIA funded an invasion of Cuba to try to overthrow Castro. This is known as the Bay of Pigs invasion. The CIA-backed forces were quickly defeated by Castro's army. So as historians, we always try to gather evidence based on facts. For our assignments that are going to follow this presentation, we are going to try to contextualize and corroborate two documents written by Fidel Castro around the time of the Cuban Revolution. We will carefully analyze these documents, and you will develop a claim addressing the lesson's central historical question. How did Fidel Castro view the United States?